Next up, Politico has a question for you, okay? How does a straight white male Democrat run for president? And that's actually the headline of a new article out today. And this piece, it begins by pointing out only one of the official 2020 Democratic presidential candidates right now is a heterosexual white man, former Congressman John Delaney. And here's an excerpt about those, though, who have not announced that they could or will be running. I don't know, we'll see. Because I have to read this to you. Check this out. But of the 17 Democrats reportedly still pondering a presidential bid, all but one is a straight white man. It's hard to chalk that up to coincidence. Clearly, the women and minority candidates sense that the water is warm for them, and the straight white men appear to be worried that this is just not their year. The article does point.
Well, it would be a first because it's been their year every single year.
It's been your world. And it's just nobody's saying you don't have it. It's like, oh, now you're sharing, and like what people are. But hey, the article does point out that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. So it does acknowledge that they have been the top two candidates in nearly every primary poll. And then they make this point. Still, the straight white men, including Biden and Sanders, are not being irrational by hesitating. Yes, they are risking a loss of media buzz, A-list staff, and access to donor networks by allowing others to get a head start, but they have good reason to tread carefully. Issues pertaining to race and gender are bound to be prominent in the campaign, and white men do not exactly have the best track record of dealing with them. And to be fair, it ends with this point. We don't need to feel sorry for the straight white male Democrats. Yes, they have challenges to overcome in a Democratic primary, but female and minority candidates still have to face bigotry every day. And the writer continues telling white men who are thinking about running that they will have to show how they can unite the party. People on Twitter are, though, upset about this article even being approved, because why?
Yeah, so I'm glad he put that last caveat in there. And I used to know Bill Scher back in the day, I think. But it's like the mindset's weird. Yeah, so first off, historically, and I would argue even today, that minorities and women have a much harder time. Right. And I'll just tell you a quick story. I didn't support Hillary Clinton in the primaries, I did in the general. But I remember she had won the nomination already, and I was talking to a guy who was from South Philly initially, now he's in Jersey. And anyway, he's a lifelong Democrat, but I'm just regular guy, okay? He was driving an Uber, it's this kind of classic story. Anyway, he says, I'm definitely not voting for Hillary. And I said, why? And he said in the beginning, in his own colloquial way, a bunch of things that were legitimate. Like, I don't feel like she's for one of us. I felt like Bernie was for one of us. And he also hated Trump, right? He was like, I can't stand Trump. He's an obvious crook, et cetera, right? But at the end, he added, and come on, she's a broad. And I was like, no. And that's real, that's still out there. It still affects a lot of people. And he said to me, come on, you married? And I'm like, please don't. And so, and he's been apparently married like 3 times. I'm not sure it's a woman, it might be you. But so all that stuff didn't go away, whether it's for women or for minorities. So I understand the general point, and it's fair and legitimate to point out that female candidates in Democratic primaries in 2016 generally did better. And so that's interesting. It's totally fair to point out, as the article does, that 58% of Democratic women, Democratic voters are now women. So that's a super interesting point, right? But to paint it that like poor white males, do they even have a chance in the Democratic Party, is preposterous.
Right. I mean, just because you've opened up registration doesn't mean you're not still at the front of the line.
That's hilarious.
Because you can't go anywhere in front of the line. I mean, so it's ridiculous that we still keep analyzing. It's people everywhere. Who have consistently been winning.
It's everywhere.
And that are winning today, even by their own admission.
It's everywhere. But if you look, let's think about, let's look back in history. All the presidents, except one, have all been white males. Look at all of the elections. I just think all of this stuff is just nonsense. It's just constant. We hear it all the time in comedy shows. Straight white men saying, "Oh, the minorities are taking over. They're taking over all of the television shows." And I'm like, where? Show me where. Like, turn on the television right now and let's see. It's just ridiculous. It's so ridiculous. It's offensive to the marginalized people who are taking a leap to risk themselves in this climate to run for office, knowing all of the stuff that they have to endure. When the first black president was mistreated the way that he was mistreated, and Hillary was mistreated. Whether you like her politics or not, the fact remains that a lot of people hated her just because she was a woman. We act like that sexism and the racism does not exist. That sounds like an 80-year-old. The racism and the sexism, but it's just like preposterous. Like that white men still run the show. Calm down, everybody.
Like they're kind of pointing out the things that they miss out on by not getting this head start. But I think a good part of this conversation is why they don't even need the head start, because Joe Biden could announce the day before the primary, and if he's going to win, he's going to win.
That's right.
Yeah. And those are all great points, and I want to touch on a couple of them. So why do Biden and Sanders have the lead? Now, remember, I like Bernie Sanders. I have made up my mind on who I'm going to vote for, but he's certainly. I liked him in 2016. I still like him today. So am I saying, no, he can't be a white male? Of course not. Right. In fact, I want to get to that side of the story in a second. But part of the reason that Biden and Sanders are leading right now is because of the weight of history. And the weight of history is on the side of white males.
Yes.
And so how did they get to that lead? Name recognition. Now, I think Bernie earned it by running against Hillary Clinton, et cetera, but white males historically have had a giant advantage, so they are more likely to have name recognition. Why was Biden even picked by Obama? Let's keep it real, right? There was a little bit of, I need a senior white male to make people feel comfortable with the first African-American candidate. That is the weight of history that has given Biden a giant advantage. Remember, he didn't do well in any of the presidential runs that he had. So in a sense, it was his race giving him that privilege of being able to be vice president and then getting to the position that he's in now. And let's acknowledge that, in terms of both race and women, Trump's attacks against Elizabeth Warren. He calls her Pocahontas. And now the press is having a legitimate conversation about whether Elizabeth Warren has not reacted well enough to that racist attack against her, and hence maybe she shouldn't run. What? So now she's getting disqualified in at least some people's minds, and unfortunately a lot of chatter about this in the mainstream media based on, did she react well enough to a racist attack?
Yeah.
I mean, you want to talk about extra burdens on people?
Right.
So now finally, to get to the other side of this equation, does that mean, and what I'm also a little bit worried about here is this is a kind of a prelude to, and there's the subtext that you see throughout the article, in my opinion, of like, so let's make sure that it is not a straight white male. But wait, we didn't talk about policy. No, our point here is we don't judge people by the color of their skin or their gender in both directions, right? And so policy first. So if you say to me, hey, Ben Carson should be the Democratic nominee, I say, hell no. Right. If you say Betsy DeVos should be the nominee, I say, hell no. So let's find out what their policies are. So look, I think that people misuse the word identity politics. I think that someone's identity could give them a perspective that is important and needed and is an advantage. It doesn't mean that you don't care about their policy. So Ben Carson might have an African-American perspective that could be valuable to a conversation. He has chosen not to utilize that, right? But it could be advantageous in a situation, but that doesn't mean we have to support him just based on that perspective that he might have. You have to actually show it in your policies. So I don't want either side doing nonsense litmus tests.
The phrase identity politics, so there's so much privilege that comes behind even saying that, because even saying that and thinking that's a thing, you have to come from a place of not knowing what it's like to have your identity mean so much to how you move through this world, whether you like it or not. And so it's not really identity politics. It's like, look around. Look at our criminal justice system. Look at our education system. Look at our healthcare system. It's not identity politics. You just have to acknowledge people and that they move through this world different than you do.
So I'm just
gonna, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Just one quick example, but give you thousands if you want. So African Americans lived in districts that were redlined, for example, right? So that makes it harder to get a loan, and that has a huge impact on their life. Now, if you're white, you didn't have to deal with that, but you didn't know you didn't have to deal with that. So in a sense, there was identity politics played on your behalf.
Right.
But you just never knew it. And it's not your fault necessarily, right? But you were the beneficiary of that identity politics. Yeah. So to turn around and say, now when blacks or Latinos or women get a fair chance at running, identity politics.
Of course.
All of a sudden, now that it's not to your complete advantage, now you bring up identity politics.
And please list me the names of the men that have had to deal with the likability factor, which is always coming into play, which you mentioned with Elizabeth Warren. It all comes down to she's not likable, she's not warm enough. Hillary wasn't warm enough. But yet and still, you never hear these crib keeper looking white men being held to the same standard of being likable, because we've been programmed to believe that that's what it's supposed to be. And anytime you shake up what it's supposed to be, people start panicking and start saying dumb stuff like this.
Not Crypt Keeper, though.
Yeah, the Crypt Keeper. Tired of them.
No, but you know what, though? And I'm not sure I ever thought of it this way. So, Ida, it's a great point. How come nobody ever talks about Mitch McConnell's likability?
Man.
Are you kidding me? Who likes Mitch McConnell? Yeah. But we never have that conversation. And likability? Look at Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, one of the most odious characters we've ever had on the public stage, and we're judging whether Elizabeth Warren is likable enough?
Right.
Have you lost your mind?
That's the word though, Cenk, you just said it. Odious is the perfect word. In Spanish, my grandmother used to say, odioso. That's exactly what he is. Odious is, you don't understand, you just touched my soul.
Thanks for watching this free clip of the Young Turks. Don't forget to become a TYT member today. For more exclusive content, join now at tyt.com/join.